The studio lights were bright, the laughter was fresh, and the air inside the room was filled with excitement. Another typical night on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Cameras panned over the audience as they clapped and cheered. Then, with a familiar smile, Jimmy introduced his next guest, Tom Selleck. The crowd roared. Tom walked in, calm and charming, just like always. At 79, the Hollywood legend had been through every kind of fame. He shook Jimmy's hand and sat down. The mood was relaxed. They joked about Magnum PI, Blue Bloods, and even about Tom's avocado farm in California. Everything seemed normal. But something in Tom's eyes said otherwise. He wasn't just here for fun. Then came a pause. Jimmy looked down at his cue. Carden smiled awkwardly. "Tom," he said, "do you ever feel like your image as the man's man is a little outdated these days?" The studio became quiet. A few people chuckled, unsure if it was a joke. Tom raised an eyebrow. "Outdated how?" he asked, his voice calm but serious. Jimmy smirked. "I mean, there's a new generation now. More sensitive, more progressive. Some say your kind of masculinity doesn't belong anymore." That hit like a punch. Some in the crowd laughed nervously. Others looked uncomfortable. Tom paused. Then he said slowly, "So being strong, reliable, and protective is something we're supposed to cancel now." Jimmy tried to keep it playful, but Tom didn't smile. He leaned forward, looking right at the host. "America might be evolving, Jimmy, but values aren't trends. Integrity isn't vintage." The studio fell silent. "Do you think masculinity is toxic because it doesn't match your version of sensitivity? Then you're not really having a conversation. You're pushing an agenda." Gasps were heard. The control room went into chaos. Producers whispered frantically. "It's Tom going off script." Jimmy shifted in his seat. "Come on, Tom," he said, now clearly irritated. "Don't you think? It's time to retire the tough guy routine." Tom's tone sharpened. "I'm not a routine," he said. "I'm a man who's lived almost 8 decades, seen the cost of silence, and still believes in speaking plainly. If that makes me toxic, then maybe the label is the problem, not the person." The tension broke the room. Some people clapped. Others stayed frozen. Jimmy tried to smile, but his jaw was tight. Then came the moment no one expected. Jimmy looked into the camera and said, "We're going to take a quick break." But before the show cut out, Tom turned slightly and said something off mic barely caught by the audio. "People need to look behind the curtain." It was just 5 words. But those 5 words would be replayed millions of times in the next 24 hours. The commercial break came. When the show returned, Tom was gone. The official story from the studio was short. Mr. Selleck left the set early due to creative differences. But online, it exploded. Hashtag Selleck via Kimmel started trending in less than an hour. Clips from the argument flooded social media. News anchors debated it. Talk shows discussed it. Podcasts released emergency episodes. But something was strange. A few sharp-eyed viewers noticed something in Tom's final words. "Look behind the curtain." Was it just a figure of speech? A Reddit thread popped up analyzing the moment frame by frame. Users discovered that Tom had tapped his fingers in a pattern on the armrest Morse code. One veteran claimed it spelled out the word fog. No one understood what it meant yet. But something had started. Something bigger than a late night argument. And somewhere far from the Hollywood lights, a group of people were watching closely, people who didn't want this conversation to continue. What Tom had said wasn't just personal, it was a warning. And the world was finally listening. The next morning, America woke up to a media storm. Every major network had the story at the top of their hour. Tom Selleck clashes with Jimmy Kimmel on live TV. Clips of the heated moment ran on repeat, with anchors and panelists debating what it all meant. Some called Tom brave. Others called him outdated. But one thing was certain: the country was talking. Meanwhile, online forums and underground blogs weren't focused on the fight at all. They were obsessed with one thing: fog. That's strange. Morse code message had sparked hundreds of theories. Was it a military reference? A secret organization? A coded warning? A tech-savvy user named CipherTrace47 posted a video breakdown. He slowed the footage and enhanced the audio. "Look behind the curtain," Tom had said. But now the words sounded more deliberate, slower, like he wanted them to be remembered. Then came the second discovery. In a paused frame, just for a split second, Tom's phone screen, left on the table, showed a note. Blurry but visible. Operation FOG status. Active. The internet exploded. By noon, the hashtag Operation Fog was trending worldwide. Independent journalists began digging. And one of them, Amira Caldwell, a former war correspondent turned truth seeker, picked up the scent. She had once interviewed Tom Selleck years ago during a USO tour in Afghanistan. She remembered him not just as a celebrity, but as someone who asked tough questions about defense contracts and troop withdrawals. He had always seemed more politically aware than he let on. Now, Amira went live on her YouTube channel, watched by over 2 million subscribers. "This isn't just a culture war argument," she said. "Tom Selleck is warning us about something. Operation Fog is real, and it's tied to government secrecy. I believe it involves a joint program between private media companies and federal agencies to monitor and influence public opinion. What you think is entertainment may actually be surveillance." Some called it conspiracy, but others listened. At the same time, inside a glass-walled building in Virginia, a man named Alec Granger stood in silence. He was the Deputy Director of Domestic Influence Operations, a unit the public didn't know existed. He watched the Kimmel clip on loop, then tapped the phone on his desk. "Tom knows," he said into the receiver. "And now, everyone else might too." Back in Los Angeles, Tom Selleck had disappeared from public view. His agent claimed he was resting. But no paparazzi had spotted him. No friends had seen him. He had gone completely off the grid. Amira tried contacting him but got no response. That's when she received an anonymous email. No name, no signature, just an encrypted file and a short message. "He left this behind. Make sure people see it." The file opened to a grainy video, clearly shot in secret. Tom was alone, looking directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, I've already been silenced or forced underground," he said. "This isn't about masculinity. It's about control." Operation FOG began as a media partnership to steer narratives in favor of national interest. But it's grown. Now it manipulates elections, censors whistleblowers, and rewrites history in real time. You think your opinions are your own? Think again. This is my warning. Don't trust the screen. Look behind it. Amira's hands trembled. She uploaded the video instantly. Within minutes, it spread across the globe. But then came the takedowns. The video was scrubbed from YouTube, Twitter, even Reddit. Accounts were suspended. News stations that tried to report it were shut down mid-broadcast. Amira's channel was banned. But it was too late. The video had been copied, mirrored, and downloaded thousands of times. It was everywhere. What had started as a viral moment was now something much bigger, a global alert. People were waking up, and the ones behind Operation Fog were watching closely, preparing their next move. The game had changed. And Tom Selleck, the unlikely messenger, had lit the first spark. The internet was now a battlefield. By the third day, government officials were denying the existence of Operation Fog. Press secretaries called it baseless conspiracy. Late-night hosts mocked it, saying Selleck had finally lost it. But the more they denied, the more people started asking questions. Encrypted forums lit up. Cyber sleuths traced domain registrations linked to obscure media startups. Almost all of them pointed to the same holding company in Virginia Tarsus. Analytics, a name not found on any public stock exchange, yet curiously well-funded and connected. Meanwhile, Amira Caldwell had gone into hiding. After her broadcast was taken down, her apartment was ransacked. Not robbed, searched, laptops gone, hard drives missing, cameras destroyed. But she had backups. Stored offline, mailed in secret to trusted contacts. She wasn't just a journalist now, she was a fugitive with evidence. Inside a dim motel in Arizona, Amira set up a burner laptop and opened one of the recovered files from Tom's hidden message stash. It contained scanned government memos. Marked fog redline, Tier 2, Celebrity Target Assessment. Names were listed, actors, journalists, even athletes. Each one had a risk level next to them. Beside Tom Selleck's name, Phase 3 exposure high risk. Preemptive containment recommended. Her blood ran cold. Selleck wasn't just speaking out. He had been under surveillance for years. Interviews, public events, even casual dinners all documented, all analyzed. And now he was missing, possibly detained, or worse. Amira knew she couldn't fight this alone. She contacted an old friend, Malik Reyes, a former intelligence analyst turned whistleblower. They hadn't spoken since the Snowden leaks. Malik was off-grid, living under a new identity in Colombia. She sent him the files. Jesus, he replied. This is bigger than anything I've seen. It's not just media control. Operation Fog is behavioral programming. They're nudging people emotionally using screen time, algorithms, influencers. It's designed to keep the public docile, divided, distracted. Amira leaned back, stunned. And Tom tried to tell us during a late-night interview. Malik nodded, because no one would suspect him. That was the brilliance of it. But someone higher up must have caught wind. The backlash was too fast. That same night, something unexpected happened. A former CBS producer went live anonymously on a dark web stream. Her face hidden, her voice masked, but her badge was real. She showed archived footage from 2018 Tom Selleck meeting quietly with senior media executives. The discussion, influence hygiene. The phrase repeated again and again. Then came the revelation. Jimmy Kimmel's show, the producer claimed, is one of many late-night platforms contracted under FOG's sub-program EchoWire. Hosts are given coded scripts, pre-approved questions, and real-time feedback. During interviews, controversy is manufactured to bury real news. Amira clipped the footage and sent it to every journalist she still trusted. But none of them would air it. One replied, "If I touch this, I lose my job or worse." Meanwhile, the mainstream narrative changed. Tom Selleck's name began trending again, but this time as unstable, misinformed, a danger. To civil discourse, old interviews were repackaged, quotes taken out of context. A former co-star even went on TV claiming Tom was paranoid for years. The smear campaign was brutal. Amira saw it for what it was, digital character assassination. They were rewriting his image in real time, making the public doubt their memory of him, making him easier to silence. But she had one last move. Inside her encrypted drive, she found GPS metadata from one of Tom's old photos taken just days before his Kimmel appearance. The location: a remote cabin in Montana near the Canadian border. No phone towers, no cameras, just forest. It was a long shot, but if he was alive, that's where he'd go. Amira booked a one-way ticket under a false name. The plane left at dawn. The message from Malik buzzed in her inbox before takeoff. "You're getting too close. They're watching everything. Move fast." She turned off her phone and looked out the window. This wasn't just a story anymore. 'Twas a mission. And somewhere in the mountains, the man who started it all might still be waiting. With the final piece of the truth, the air in Montana was colder than Amira expected. She arrived at the edge of Glacier National Park just past midnight, bundled in layers, her breath visible under the full moon. The rental car's GPS lost signal miles ago, and she relied on a printed map marked with a red circle where the old photo suggested Tom might be hiding. The forest was silent. No signs of other people. Just trees, shadows, and the hum of wind. She walked for over an hour, boots crunching through old snow patches until finally she saw it. Small cabin, wooden, dark, isolated. She hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if someone else had set a trap? Amira approached carefully. No light inside. No smoke from the chimney. But the door creaked open before she could knock. And there he stood, Tom Selleck, thinner than before, beard longer, eyes sharper, but unmistakably him. He looked her over, silent for a moment, then said softly, "You came." Amira exhaled in relief. "You're alive." Inside the cabin was sparse just firewood, canned food, and a single laptop powered by a solar rig. Tom poured her coffee from a dented kettle. They sat across from each other at a rough wooden table. "I saw your broadcast," he said. "You took a big risk." "You took the first one," Amira replied. Why didn't you just tell the truth outright?" Tom shook his head. "You can't just shout a truth that big. People have to uncover it themselves. That's how you make them believe." He leaned forward and placed a USB drive on the table. "This has everything. The original fog directive. Psychological targeting algorithms. Payment trails from federal. Accounts to media firms. Names of current contractors. It's all here." Amira stared at the small device. "Why me?" "'Cause you're the only one left who didn't flinch." They talked for hours. Tom explained how, over the last decade, he'd watched the entertainment industry shift from storytelling to social programming. At first, he dismissed it, but then came the sponsored scripts, the sudden blacklisting of certain voices, the subtle pressure not to ask questions. And when he pushed back, his friends disappeared. His phone tapped, contracts canceled. Operation Fog wasn't just surveillance. It was emotional manipulation on a national scale. Subtle, predictive, engineered to stir division just enough. To distract, he was supposed to say nothing on Kimmel. But when he saw the prearranged question sheet, he knew it was his only shot. So he went off script and paid the price. "They're not looking for truth," Tom said. "They're looking for compliance." Before Amira could respond, a sound interrupted the stillness. A faint rustle outside. Then boots on snow. Tom moved quickly. Lights off. He pushed Amira toward a trapdoor under the rug. "Go now." But they followed you. 2 flashlights cut through the dark outside. Amira climbed down into the crawl space, clutching the USB. Tom closed the trapdoor and covered it just before the front door burst open. Voices, mail.com, and authoritative. "Mr. Selleck, we just want to talk." Tom didn't answer. A pause. Then the unmistakable sound of a weapon being cocked. "We know she's here too. Make it easy." Amira held her breath. Dust filled her nose. The space was narrow, freezing. She could hear Tom's boots above her. Then his voice, "She's not here." A scuffle, a shout. Something heavy fell, then silence, and then nothing. For minutes, Amira didn't move. She didn't know if Tom was alive or gone. But she knew this much: the USB had to make it out somehow. The world needed to see what was on it. By dawn, she emerged from the woods cold and shaking. Tom was gone. The cabin burned to the ground. No bodies, no blood. Just ash. But in her coat, the USB stayed safe. And Amira had already made her decision. She wasn't going back to hiding. She was going to leak everything and let the world decide what it wanted to believe. Amira didn't sleep for 2 days. After escaping the mountains of Montana, she made her way to a safe house in Seattle, a tiny studio rented under a fake name. No digital footprint, no phones. Just her, a burner laptop, and the USB Tom had. given her before vanishing, she hadn't cried. Not yet. Not when she smelled the smoke from the burned cabin. Not when she read the headlines claiming Tom Selleck retreats for health reasons. And not when she realized how far this conspiracy actually went. But as she clicked through the files on the drive, her hands trembled. There were documents, labeled Directive Echo, Stage 3, which outlined the manipulation of celebrity platforms to test emotional reactions in live audiences. News cycles were not just reported, they were seeded. Influencers paid to say things not because they believed them, but because their words triggered outrage, then analysis, then silence. And the deeper she went, the more real it became. There were lists of names, politicians, talk show hosts, studio heads, and Jimmy Kimmel was one of them. Amira stared at the evidence, not just complicit, but instructed. His entire exchange with Tom Selleck was mapped out in a rehearsal memo dated 2 days before the show. They'd prepared responses for every possible thing Tom could say except the part where he went off script. That's why he was ejected. That's why federal agents had shown up later. He had broken the script, and that meant war. Amira didn't trust the press. Too many reporters already compromised. She needed someone on the inside, someone still untouchable. So she turned to the one person who'd warned her years ago that the entertainment world was a pipeline, not a mirror. Senator Carlos Rivas. He had once been a journalist himself, before running for office. Quiet, respected, and hated by all the right people. Amira sent him an encrypted message using an old channel they'd used during a different investigation. She didn't expect a response, but within an hour her burner phone lit up. One word: come. The meeting happened in the back of a coffee shop in D.C., behind a bookshelf that slid open into a converted war shelter from the Cold War. Carlos stood in a worn leather coat, his face older than she remembered, his eyes tired but sharp. "Have it?" he asked. She nodded, handing him the USB. "It's everything." He didn't plug it in, pocketed it, and said, "Then you're already in danger." Tommy was trying to expose this from inside. "I know," Carlos replied. He wasn't the only one. He poured her tea, sat down, then explained. Operation Fog had started as a counter-propaganda program during foreign conflicts. But after years of refinement, it had been turned inward. Now, it didn't just manage threats, it shaped national emotions. Elections, riots, celebrity scandals, all engineered for reaction. The public didn't need to be convinced anymore. They just needed to be distracted long enough to forget what they were angry about. "People don't believe truth when it's handed to them," Carlos said. "They believe it when it's stolen. What do? We leak it. Not through media, through something they can't censor." Carlos connected with a small network of whistleblowers who had been gathering proof. The plan was dangerous, but simple. Use Tom's files as a foundation, cross-check it with other leaks, and build a digital dossier. Not a website, not a video. A data bomb. Self-replicating archive sent to 10 trusted nodes worldwide. If even one copy made it public, the truth would spread like wildfire. They called it Project Breakline. It would launch in 72 hours. Amira was tasked with assembling the human-side videos of testimonies, raw footage of celebrities being briefed, and Tom's final messages before going dark. She found a private recording he had made on his laptop. In it, he sat by the fire, voice low but resolute. "If you're watching this, it means I've failed or vanished. But the truth's still alive. I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to remind people we're allowed to ask questions. We're allowed to be uncomfortable. And no one, not a network, not a host, not a government, gets to tell you who you are." That was when Amira cried. Finally, not out of fear, but because, for the first time, she believed they might actually win. But as the clock ticked down to the launch, a new alert popped up on Carlos's secure server. One of the 10 data nodes had been compromised. Someone knew. Someone was coming. The silence in Carlos's bunker felt heavier now. The screen glowed with a red notification, Node 7. Offline, the encryption had held for 38 minutes before being overridden by a signature only one agency used in SIC. The National Strategic Information Command, a secretive task force, buried deep inside U.S. intelligence with the authority to neutralize internal narrative threats. "They found us," Amira whispered, backing away from the monitor. Carlos remained still. "Not us, just one of our launch points. But that means they're watching the grid." He pulled out a printed map and circled 3 locations. "We reroute, switch protocols, keep the launch alive." "What happens if they find the others?" she asked. He didn't answer. They had less than 36 hours until Project Breakline activated. The plan was simple: 10 upload nodes, each one linked to backup transmitters scattered globally. A failure of 1 or 2 could be patched. But if more were compromised, the archive might never make it to the public. And worst, Selleck's warning would die in the shadows. Along with any chance of exposing Operation Fog, Amira worked through the night, verifying node integrity, reaching out to allies in Iceland, Kenya, and Australia. She used aliases, scrambled networks, voice filters, but with each message, the risk grew. By dawn, 3 more nodes were under silent attack. Someone wasn't just tracking them, they were anticipating them. Amira stared at the files again, retracing her steps. Something wasn't right. Someone close had given away their moves. And then she remembered a name: Lara Vasa, political commentator, who had once been part of their whistleblower circle but had vanished a year ago after signing an exclusive media deal with GlobalView, the most watched platform in the world. "Carlos, we have a mole." He nodded. "I know. You think it's Voss." He paused. "I think it's worse. I think she was turned." They pulled her last known communication logs. Embedded within her podcast metadata were encrypted ping signals meant to trace listeners' IPs. Each ping was a tag, like an invisible mark sprayed on a wall. And they had listened to one of her shows 3 nights ago. That's how NSIC had tracked the first node. Okay? Now they had less than a day. Carlos leaned over his desk and opened a small lockbox. Inside was a military-grade satellite phone. "We go analog. We activate fallback node 11. There's an 11th. It's not digital, it's human." He handed Amira a contact card. No name, just a date and a location: July 11th, 2025, Athens, Greece National Library basement. "There's a man there," Carlos said. "Used to be deep inside Operation Fog. He disappeared after he tried to leak it the first time. He's still alive. He has the original schema, everything." Amira didn't ask more. She packed her bag, burned her laptop, and left within the hour under a fake passport. The flight was quiet, but her mind wasn't. Somewhere, Tom was likely watching or hiding. Maybe both. He had handed her a puzzle, and piece by piece it was leading to something larger than either of them had imagined. When she landed in Athens, she didn't go through the main terminal. She had arranged for a private exit, coordinated through a contact Carlos trusted. At 6:42 p.m., she stood in the empty marble halls of the National Library. Tourists bustled outside, unaware that beneath their feet, truth waited in exile. She found the basement entrance behind an old service door. The air was thick with dust and silence. And then, from the shadows, a voice. "I was wondering when you'd come." The man stepped forward, otter, gaunt, but sharp-eyed. His name was Janos Calderaz, once a military psychologist, now a ghost in global databases. He looked at her, then the flash drive in her hand. "They never expected Tom to find me," he said quietly. "But he did. He gave me time." Mira asked, "Do you have it?" "The schema." He smiled sadly. "No, I am the schema." She didn't understand. Not yet. He led her deeper into the vault. There were no computers. Just scrolls of paper, blueprints, hand-drawn charts of media nodes, psychological pressure. Points geopolitical strategies disguised as talk show segments. He turned to her and said, "You think they're watching? You don't understand they're listening. All the time. Not to what we say, but how we feel when we say it." Amira felt a chill crawl up her spine. Calderas placed one page in her hands. It showed the next phase of Operation Fog. A controlled national event, something massive, something tragic, designed to reset the emotional clock of the public. Its codename, Echo Winter, scheduled for deployment in 48 hours. And now Amira had a choice: warn the world in time, or watch it fall silent. The next 24 hours were a blur of movement, silence, and shadow. Amira stayed hidden inside the stone labyrinth of the National Library, guarded only by the dust of centuries and Janos Caldera's presence. Outside, the world was already reacting. To a manipulated version of events. Selleck's interview was being dissected, misquoted, turned into a celebrity meltdown for headlines. But the real warning, the hidden message behind his words, was still buried. Calderas worked by candlelight, his hands shaking as he laid out the final schematic of Operation Fog and its final act. Echo Winter. "It's not just a media storm," he explained. "It's emotional architecture. They plan to trigger a national tragedy, fake or real. It doesn't matter. The goal is to reset how people feel, to drain them of resistance." Amira was horrified. And Tom knew this. Calderas nodded. He learned from someone inside. That's why he took the risk going on Jimmy Kimmel Live. He wasn't arguing about masculinity, he was speaking in code. Every sentence he spoke was tied to a keyword in the archive. Amira stared at the blueprints. So that whole interview? IT. It was a delivery mechanism. Yes, but they shut it down before the final phrase. The last trigger. That's why he pushed back harder than he ever had. He knew the risk. She sat back thinking. So how do we stop Echo Winter? Calderas turned to her, suddenly grave. We don't stop it. We expose it. It's the only defense against psychological manipulation, ... is awareness. He handed her a small crystal chip, the only known backup of the schema's full archive. Get this to someone who can speak freely, someone people trust, someone not yet compromised. Amira nodded. There's one person left. She boarded a night train from Athens, avoiding airports and digital tracking. She traveled under 3 names, passed through villages, churches, embassies, even hid inside a refrigerated truck crossing into Germany. Her final stop, Geneva. Inside a media compound outside the city, a retired international anchor named Marta Weiss ran a private live stream network with millions of subscribers. She had once been silenced for exposing NATO mishandling in the Balkans, but now she operated freely from Swiss territory. Marta greeted Amira like a ghost from another era. No questions, just instinct. Within hours, they uploaded the entire archive, not to a single platform, but in fragments across different sites, mirrored through academic servers, old forums, and public domain libraries. The file was titled The Selleck Code. As it spread, people began to understand. Each phrase from Tom's interview matched a note of Operation Fog. Every pause, every line, a reference to a hidden document. Even the moment when he told Kimmel, maybe the label is the problem, not the person, was tied to a study on weaponized identity politics used in psychological warfare. The story exploded globally. It was no longer about a celebrity argument. It was a coordinated media. Hijacking one man using the very system meant to silence him, to light the match instead. Protests began in Los Angeles, Berlin, Tokyo. Students marched with signs that read, "I am not a program." Networks scrambled to discredit the leaks, but the files were everywhere, decentralized, immutable. And then came the breaking point. An anonymous source from within NSIC leaked the operational date of Echo Winter. It was scheduled for that weekend. But with the plan exposed, politicians pulled out. Private contractors severed ties. Tech platforms issued statements denying involvement. But their algorithms began showing signs of manual override proof of manipulation. In Washington, hearings were called. Tom Selleck, now back in hiding, sent one final encrypted message. To Marta Weiss, it was a simple audio recording, his voice calm but firm. If you're hearing this, it means we made it. This wasn't about me, or a talk show, or masculinity. It was about waking up, because when they can control how we feel, they already control how we vote, how we fear, how we live. We just bought the world one more day. What it does with that, is up to us. The recording ended. Marta let it play once more on her stream, followed by the archive's timestamp. July 11th, 2025, the day the script broke. Tom Selleck's name would never be seen the same way again. Not as a fading TV icon, but as the man who turned a stage built for entertainment into a global signal fire. And in that fire, truth finally found oxygen.